They sent him to Class-9 Deathworld to humble him. He filed a safety audit that got the planet reclassified. Marcus Webb was not a soldier, not a diplomat, and certainly not a hero in any traditional sense of the word. He was something far more dangerous to the Galactic Concordance. He was an auditor who actually did his job. The administrative hub of the Concordance stretched across 17 orbital platforms above the purple gas giant of Velix Prime, and within those gleaming corridors walked beings from 100 different species, all united under one bureaucratic empire that had maintained peace across 12 star systems for nearly 4,000 years. They had rules for everything, regulations stacked upon regulations, forms that referenced other forms in an endless maze of procedure. And Marcus Webb had read every single one of them. He sat now in a waiting area outside the High Council chamber, his standard-issue datapad resting on his knee, his fingers occasionally tapping notes into its surface. The Sithrani receptionist behind the curved desk kept glancing at him with all four of her eyes, and Marcus could recognize the expression even on an alien face. It was the look of someone who desperately wished he would simply disappear. He had been getting that look a lot lately. 3 years ago, humanity had been admitted to the Galactic Concordance as a provisional member species. They were newcomers, still learning their place in a galaxy that had been civilized for millennia before humans had even discovered fire. Most human representatives understood this and behaved accordingly, quiet, grateful, eager to please. Marcus had apparently not received that particular memo. In his 3 years as a safety compliance officer, he had filed over 2,000 violation reports. He had forced the recall of 17 different starship models due to inadequate emergency lighting. He had personally shut down a tritium processing plant owned by the broodmate of a senior coordinator because the facility lacked proper ventilation according to Regulation 334, subsection 7, paragraph 12. He had even filed a complaint about the temperature in the council chamber itself, citing that it was exactly 3.2 degrees below galactic workplace, standard 7.4.1. That particular complaint was why he was sitting here now. The door to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and a tall Morvathi official gestured for Marcus to enter. He stood, straightened his simple gray uniform, and walked inside with his datapad clutched firmly in his hand. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. It rose in tiers around a central speaking platform, with representatives from dozens of species looking down at whoever stood below. Holographic displays floated overhead, showing star maps and administrative data, and the air hummed with the quiet buzz of translation devices. High Coordinator Velthrix of the Sithrani sat at the highest tier, her elongated face arranged in an expression that Marcus had learned to recognize as barely contained fury. She was ancient even by Sithrani standards. Her scales faded to a pale silver, but her eyes remained sharp and calculating. "Officer Webb," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber's acoustics, "do you understand why you have been summoned here today?" "I assume it concerns my temperature regulation complaint, High Coordinator," Marcus replied, his voice calm and steady. "I have brought supporting documentation if the council requires it." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled representatives. Several of them shifted in their seats, and Marcus noted that at least 3 were making what appeared to be rude gestures in their respective cultural contexts. "Your complaint," Velthrix said slowly, "suggested that this chamber, the heart of Concordance governance, fails to meet basic workplace standards." "With respect, High Coordinator, I did not suggest it. The thermal readings confirmed it. I have the data here if anyone wishes to review my methodology." He held up his datapad, and the murmurs grew louder. Velthrix's eyes narrowed. She had dealt with difficult individuals before, rebels and dissidents and would-be revolutionaries, but none of them had ever threatened her position quite like this small, unremarkable human with his endless forms and citations. The worst part was that he was always technically correct. Every complaint he filed was backed by regulation. Every violation he reported was genuine. He never exaggerated, never fabricated, never made claims he could not support with documentation. He was, in the most infuriating way possible, simply doing exactly what his job description required. And that made him impossible to officially punish. But Velthrix had not maintained her position for 600 years without learning a few tricks. She leaned forward, and a cold smile crossed her face. "Officer Webb, your dedication to safety compliance has been noted and appreciated. In fact, the Council has decided to reward your diligence with a promotion." Marcus blinked. This was unexpected. "You are hereby elevated to the Frontier Assessment Division," Velthrix continued, "with immediate assignment to conduct a full safety audit of Roman 7. The chamber fell silent. Even the translation devices seemed to pause. Marcus accessed his datapad and quickly searched the planetary database. Roman 7 appeared on his screen with a classification that made his eyebrows rise slightly. Class 9 Deathworld. The most dangerous habitable classification in the entire Concordance system. Acidic atmosphere, massive predatory fauna, unstable tectonic activity. The file noted that no survey team had successfully completed an assessment in over 200 years. The last attempt had resulted in complete mission failure with no survivors. Around the chamber, various representatives were watching Marcus, with expressions ranging from cruel amusement to something that might have been pity. They expected him to refuse. They expected him to resign. They expected this insufferable human to finally understand his place and retreat back to whatever insignificant duties he could handle. Marcus looked up from his datapad. "I accept the assignment," he said. Velthrix's smile faltered. "I will require the full equipment manifest for Class 9 assessments," Marcus continued, already making notes. "Additionally, I would like to know if there is a standardized form for Deathworld audits, or if I should adapt the general Frontier Assessment template. Regulation 891 suggests the former, but I could not locate the specific document in the archive." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Velthrix leaned back in her seat, her expression unreadable. "The administrative office will provide everything you require, Officer Webb. You depart in 3 standard days." "Excellent," Marcus said. "That should give me enough time to review the existing survey data. Is there anything else the Council requires of me today?" There was not. As Marcus walked out of the chamber, his datapad already filling with notes and preparation lists, Velthrix watched him go with eyes that had grown very cold indeed. The human would learn his lesson on Roman 7, she told herself. The planet would humble him in ways that regulations and procedures could never address, and when he came crawling back, if he came back at all, he would finally understand that some forces in the universe could not be contained by paperwork. She was, of course, completely wrong about that. They sent him to Class 9 Deathworld to humble him. He filed a safety audit that got the planet reclassified. The survey shuttle dropped through the atmosphere of Roman 7, with a shudder that made Marcus immediately reach for his datapad. "Atmospheric entry stabilizers operating at only 63% efficiency," he noted aloud, his stylus moving across the screen. "That is below the minimum threshold established in Transport Safety Regulation 445. Behind him, the 3 members of his support team exchanged glances. They were all Concordance officers, 2 Sithrani and 1 Morvathi, and none of them had volunteered for this assignment. They had been chosen specifically because their superiors wanted them out of the way, which meant they had exactly 0 motivation to help the humans survive. The pilot, a scarred Sithrani named Torval, let out a harsh laugh. "You worry about stabilizers. Look outside, human." Marcus looked. The viewport showed a landscape that seemed designed by something with a deep hatred for life itself. Crimson jungles stretched to the horizon, their twisted vegetation pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Massive geysers erupted in the distance, spraying clouds of yellowish vapor into a sky the color of old blood. And moving through the jungle canopy, barely visible but unmistakably huge, were shapes that could only be predators. "Fascinating," Marcus said, and went back to his notes. Torval stared at him. The shuttle landed on a rocky outcropping that the navigation system identified as relatively stable, emphasis on relatively. The moment the engines powered down, the sounds of HFY 7 began to filter through the hull. Distant roars, the hiss of escaping gases, the crack of what might have been volcanic activity or might have been something far worse. "Standard protocol suggests we establish a defensive perimeter before any surface activity," said the Morvathi officer, whose name was Grath. He had not moved from his seat and showed no intention of doing so. "I agree," Marcus said. "However, I need to take initial atmospheric readings to verify the survey data. According to the file, the air should be acidic enough to cause respiratory damage within minutes." "Then perhaps you should stay inside," suggested Kurevel, the youngest of the Sithrani officers. Unlike her companions, she seemed genuinely curious about the human rather than simply contemptuous. "That would make it difficult to complete the audit," Marcus replied. He checked the seals on his standard-issue environment suit, noting 2 minor deficiencies that he added to his growing list of shuttle violations, and stepped into the airlock. The outer door opened. The air of HFY 7 hit his suit's sensors immediately, and Marcus watched the reading scroll across his helmet display. Sulfur compounds were high, yes, but the actual acidic content was nowhere near what the official file claimed. With proper filtration, the atmosphere was entirely breathable. He made a note of this discrepancy. Stepping fully onto the planet's surface, Marcus took a moment to observe his surroundings. The rock beneath his boots was volcanic in origin, dark and porous. The crimson vegetation began about 30 meters away, its bioluminescent veins casting an eerie glow in the dim light. And there, at the edge of the jungle, something was watching him. It emerged slowly from the undergrowth, a creature approximately the size of an earth elephant, but built like a predator. 6 powerful legs supported a body covered in armored plates, and its head split open to reveal 3 separate jaws lined with teeth that looked capable of shearing through metal. The creature roared, and the sound shook Marcus's chest even through his suit. "Human," Torval's voice crackled through the comm. "Get back to the shuttle now." Marcus did not move. Instead, he watched the creature carefully. It had emerged from cover, which meant it was not an ambush predator. It was roaring and displaying its jaws, which suggested territorial behavior rather than hunting behavior. And it had stopped at the edge of the jungle, maintaining a specific distance. "Interesting," Marcus said. He took 1 step backward, away from the jungle. The creature's display intensified for a moment. Then it turned and disappeared back into the crimson vegetation. "It appears to be protecting territory rather than actively hunting," Marcus noted into his datapad. "Standard sonic deterrent technology should be effective. I am adding this to the equipment recommendations." Inside the shuttle, Torval was staring at the external cameras with an expression of disbelief. "The human is insane," Grath muttered. Kurevel said nothing, but her eyes had grown thoughtful. Over the next 3 days, Marcus conducted a systematic survey of the immediate area. He took atmospheric samples every 4 hours. He mapped the local geology using portable sensors. He observed and documented 6 different species of predator, noting their behavioral patterns and territorial boundaries. His support team remained inside the shuttle, emerging only when absolutely necessary and always in full combat gear. They watched the human walk calmly through an environment that should have killed him within hours, and they could not understand what they were seeing. On the morning of the fourth day, Kurevel finally approached him at his makeshift field station. "How are you doing this?" she asked. "This world is Class 9, the most dangerous classification. Every survey before yours ended in death." Marcus looked up from his datapad. "I read those survey reports," he said. "The first expedition landed directly in an active volcanic zone, despite clear geological warnings. The second brought no sonic deterrence, even though the fauna profiles clearly indicated territorial behavior. The third attempted to establish a base camp next to a sulfur geyser field." He pulled up a document on his datapad and showed it to her. "Every failed mission on Roman 7 can be traced to inadequate preparation and ignored safety protocols. The planet itself is dangerous, yes, but no more dangerous than Earth was before humans developed proper technology and procedures." Kurevel's eyes widened. "You are comparing this world to your homeworld. Earth had creatures called saltwater crocodiles that killed hundreds of people every year. We had box jellyfish whose venom could stop a heart in minutes. We had hippopotamuses, large aquatic mammals that were responsible for more human deaths than almost any other animal on the continent of Africa." He gestured toward the crimson jungle. "The predators here are predictable. They follow patterns. They respond to deterrence. This place is not more dangerous than home. It is simply poorly documented." Kurevel was silent for a long moment. "You are saying the Class 9 designation is wrong." "I am saying the Class 9 designation was never properly verified," Marcus replied. "The original survey was conducted 200 years ago, and every assessment since then has simply accepted those findings without independent confirmation. That is not how safety compliance is supposed to work." He held up his datapad, and Kurevel could see the document he had been preparing. It was already over 50 pages long, filled with atmospheric data, geological surveys, fauna behavioral analyses, and cross-references to the original classification documents. "This is Form GC 7792, Marcus said. "Request for planetary hazard reclassification. Based on my findings so far, Roman 7 should be Class 5 at most, possibly Class 4. Kurevel stared at him. "You are going to challenge the official classification of a Deathworld." Marcus looked at her with genuine confusion. "That is my job," he said, "is it not?" Behind them, the jungle of Roman 7 pulsed with bioluminescent light, and somewhere in the distance, a predator roared. But Marcus Webb had already returned to his notes, completely unconcerned. He had an audit to complete. They sent him to Class 9 Deathworld to humble him. He filed a safety audit that got the planet reclassified. The message arrived on High Coordinator Velthrix's personal terminal, exactly 14 days after Marcus Webb had departed for Roman 7. She had been expecting a death notification, perhaps a distress signal followed by silence, or a formal report of mission failure. What she received instead was a requisition form. Request for additional survey drones, geological sampling equipment, and access to the original colony records from the Concordance archives, she read aloud, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. Submitted by Safety Compliance Officer Marcus Webb, currently conducting field assessment on Roman 7. Her aide, a nervous young Sithrani named Velter, shifted uncomfortably. "The human is still alive, High Coordinator." "Apparently so." Velthrix's claws scraped against her desk. This was not how things were supposed to proceed. The human should have been dead within the first day, or at the very least traumatized enough to abandon his mission and resign in disgrace. Instead, he was requesting additional resources as if Roman 7 was nothing more than a routine assignment. "Deny the request," she said. "Cite resource limitations." "Yes, High Coordinator, but I should mention that the request was filed under Regulation 445.7, Frontier Assessment Resource Allocation. If we deny it without proper justification, the Office of Administrative Oversight may. I said deny it. Velter bowed and hurried away. On the surface of Roman 7, Marcus received the denial notification 3 hours later. He read it carefully, cross-referenced it with the relevant regulations, and began composing his response. Official objection to resource denial, he dictated into his datapad. Pursuant to Regulation 445.7, subsection 3, which states that frontier assessment requests may only be denied if adequate justification is provided within 1 standard week. No justification was included in the denial notification, which constitutes a procedural violation. He filed the objection, which automatically triggered a review by the Office of Administrative Oversight. Then he went back to his survey. His camp had grown considerably over the past 2 weeks. The original landing site now featured proper defensive perimeters, sonic deterrent posts at regular intervals, and a small but functional field laboratory where Marcus analyzed his samples. The Crimson Jungle no longer seemed quite so threatening when you understood its patterns. Curavel had become his unofficial assistant. The young Sithrani officer spent more time outside the shuttle now, helping Marcus with his surveys and learning his methods. Her colleagues Torval and Grath remained inside, playing cards and waiting for the inevitable disaster that never seemed to arrive. I do not understand something, Curavel said one evening as they reviewed the day's geological data. You were sent here to fail. Everyone knows this. Why do you continue as if this were a normal assignment? Marcus considered the question. Because it is a normal assignment, he said. The Concordance has procedures for frontier assessment. Those procedures exist because they work. If I follow them correctly, there is no reason for this mission to fail. But the Council wanted you to fail. What the Council wants is not my concern, Marcus replied. My concern is safety compliance. If the Council wanted to punish me, they should have found a regulation I had violated. Instead, they sent me here hoping the planet would do their work for them. He pulled up his growing audit document. And the planet has revealed something far more interesting than my death would have been. Curavel leaned closer to look at the screen. The document had grown to over 150 pages. Marcus had organized it into sections: atmospheric analysis, geological survey, fauna behavioral studies, flora toxicology reports, and a final section titled Historical Assessment Discrepancies. What is this last section? Curavel asked. Marcus tapped the screen to expand it. I have been reviewing the original survey data from 200 years ago, the one that established the Class-9 designation, and I have found something strange. He showed her a corporate logo that appeared on several of the original documents. Veth Corrigan Extraction. They were the company that conducted the initial planetary assessment. They were also the company that received the mining rights to Roman 7 after it was classified as a Deathworld. Curavel's scales shifted color, a sign of unease. What are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything yet. I am merely noting a potential conflict of interest. According to Regulation 223.1, any party with commercial interests in a planetary classification must disclose those interests before conducting assessment activities. He pulled up another document. There is no such disclosure in the original survey file, which means either the regulation did not exist 200 years ago, or it was deliberately ignored. And if it was ignored, Marcus looked at her steadily. Then the entire Class-9 designation may be fraudulent. Curavel was silent for a long moment. She knew what Veth Corrigan was. Everyone in the Concordance knew. They were one of the largest mining corporations in the 12 systems, with connections to the highest levels of government. Their mining operations on classified Deathworlds were worth billions of credits annually. And she knew who held significant shares in Veth Corrigan. "High Coordinator Velthrix," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "I suspected as much. Her reaction to my presence has been disproportionate from the beginning. A simple auditor should not warrant the personal attention of a High Coordinator." "What will you do?" "I will continue my survey. I will gather evidence. And when my audit is complete, I will file it through proper channels." Caravel stared at him. "You realize they will try to stop you. They may try to kill you." Marcus reached into his pack and pulled out a small device. "This is a real-time data transmitter. It has been uploading my findings to the Office of Administrative Oversight since the first day I arrived. Regulation 78.3.2. All frontier assessments must be archived in real time to prevent data loss." He smiled slightly. "Even if something happens to me, the evidence will survive. That is the beauty of proper procedure." Caravel looked at the human with new eyes. She had thought him strange, perhaps even foolish, when she first met him. A small man with a datapad who seemed to think that regulations could protect him from the universe's dangers. But she was beginning to understand something important. Marcus Webb was not naive. He was not foolish. He simply believed in something that most people had forgotten, that rules and procedures existed for a reason, and that they only worked if someone was willing to enforce them. He was not fighting the system. He was using the system exactly as it was designed to be used. "I want to help," she said. Marcus handed her a second datapad. "I could use assistance with the geological survey. There are significant mineral deposits in the northern regions that I have not had time to properly document. If we work together, we can complete the assessment twice as fast." Caravel took the datapad. Outside the camp, the jungle of Keithrakroman 7 glowed with bioluminescent light, and somewhere in orbit, a message was traveling toward the Office of Administrative Oversight. One more piece of an audit that would soon shake the very foundations of the Galactic Concordance. But Marcus Webb did not think about such grand matters. He simply had work to do. They sent him to Class-9 Deathworld to humble him. He filed a safety audit that got the planet reclassified. High Coordinator Velthrix received the report from her intelligence division on a cold morning, exactly 28 days after Marcus Webb had landed on Keithrakroman 7. The human was not only alive, he was thriving. Worse, he had begun requesting access to financial records. Specifically, he had filed a formal request under Regulation 223.1 for all documentation related to conflicts of interest in the original Keithrakroman 7 planetary assessment. That request had triggered automated systems that Velthrix had hoped would never be activated. Somewhere in the vast bureaucratic machinery of the Concordance, flags were being raised, queries were being generated, and attention was being drawn to matters that had remained comfortably buried for 200 years. "This cannot continue," she said to the empty room. She activated her secure communication terminal and connected to a frequency that was not officially supposed to exist. "I need a security team dispatched to Keithrakroman 7, she said. "Official justification will be emergency extraction of a Concordance officer in danger. Actual objective is the elimination of all evidence related to the current survey, including the officer conducting it." The voice on the other end acknowledged the order. Velthrix ended the transmission and leaned back in her chair. It was regrettable, she told herself. The human had been persistent, even admirable in his dedication. But some secrets were too valuable to be exposed, and some traditions too profitable to be disturbed. The mining operations on Keithrakroman 7 had generated trillions of credits over 2 centuries. Those profits had built fortunes, funded political careers, and maintained the comfortable order of the Concordance's upper echelons. One stubborn auditor could not be allowed to threaten all of that. On the surface of Roman 7, Marcus Webb was completely unaware of the forces moving against him. His audit document had grown to 400 pages. It now included comprehensive atmospheric analysis proving that the planet's air was breathable with basic filtration, geological surveys mapping stable zones suitable for colonization, behavioral studies of 17 different predator species, showing predictable patterns that could be managed with standard deterrent technology, and most damning of all, a complete financial analysis of Veth Corrigan Extraction's operations. The evidence was overwhelming. The original survey had been deliberately falsified. Key data had been omitted, dangers had been exaggerated, and the resulting Class 9 designation had served one purpose only: to keep the planet quarantined while Veth Corrigan extracted its mineral wealth without competition. Marcus was adding the final appendix to his report, Appendix 47, evidence of fraudulent classification for commercial benefit, when Curavel burst into his field station. "Marcus, we have a problem." She was breathing hard, her scales flickering with agitation. "A ship has entered orbit, military configuration." Torval received a communication ordering him to prepare for emergency extraction. Marcus looked up from his datapad. "Emergency extraction? There is no emergency." "I know, that is what concerns me. I contacted a friend at the administrative hub, someone I trust, and she told me that the ship was dispatched by High Coordinator Velthrix herself. Marcus, this is not an extraction. This is an elimination," Marcus finished calmly. He saved his document and began backing up his files. "I expected this would happen eventually. The evidence I have gathered threatens too many powerful interests. It was only a matter of time before they decided that the risk of my survival outweighed the risk of my death." Curavel stared at him. "You expected this, and you continued anyway." "Of course. The regulations exist to protect people from exactly this kind of corruption. If I stopped every time someone powerful became inconvenienced, I would never accomplish anything." He held up his datapad and showed her a small blinking indicator in the corner of the screen. "Do you see this? This shows that my real-time backup to the Office of Administrative Oversight is functioning normally. Every page of my audit has already been transmitted. Even if they destroy my datapad, even if they destroy me, the evidence will survive." "But you will not survive." Marcus paused and looked at her. "That is a possibility," he admitted, "but I am hoping it will not come to that. You see, I have been thinking about this situation for several days now, and I believe I have found a solution that does not require anyone to die." He stood and began walking toward the main shuttle. "Where are you going?" "To meet our visitors. They will be landing soon, and I would prefer to handle this conversation in a calm and professional manner." The security team's shuttle touched down 30 minutes later. 8 heavily armed soldiers in full combat gear emerged, their weapons raised and their expressions hostile. They were Sithrani, all of them, and they moved with the precision of professionals who had done this kind of work many times before. Their commander, a scarred veteran named Velkrath, approached the survey camp expecting to find a panicked human desperately trying to flee or hide. Instead, he found Marcus Webb sitting calmly at a portable table, drinking synthesized coffee and reviewing something on his datapad. "Officer Webb," Velkrath said, his weapon still raised. "Commander," Marcus replied without looking up, "you arrived faster than I expected. Please sit down, we have matters to discuss." Velkrath's eyes narrowed. "We have orders to extract you immediately. This planet has been deemed too dangerous for continued survey operations." "Has it? That is interesting, because I just completed a 400-page assessment proving that Roman 7 is actually a Class 4 world at most. I would be happy to share my findings with you. Your findings are irrelevant. You will come with us now. Marcus finally looked up. No, I do not think I will. You see, Commander, I understand why you are really here. High Coordinator Velthrix sent you to eliminate me and destroy my evidence, but I am afraid she made a miscalculation. He held up his datapad. This device has been transmitting my complete audit to the Office of Administrative Oversight since the moment I arrived on this planet. Every piece of evidence I have gathered, including proof of financial fraud, regulatory violations, and conflict of interest, all of it is already in the official record. Killing me now would accomplish nothing except adding murder charges to High Coordinator Velthrix's eventual prosecution. Velcrath's weapon wavered. You are bluffing. I never bluff, Commander. It would be inefficient. Check your own communications logs if you doubt me. The Office of Administrative Oversight should have already initiated a preliminary inquiry based on the evidence I submitted. By now, they may have even issued an investigation order. One of the soldiers checked his wrist terminal and went pale. Commander, there is a priority message from Central Administration. All operations related to Roman 7 are to be suspended pending official review. Velcrath stared at Marcus. You planned this. I followed proper procedure, Marcus corrected. There is a difference. Now, Commander, you have a choice. You can follow through with your original orders and spend the rest of your life in a prison colony, or you can stand down and be remembered as someone who made the right decision when it mattered. The jungle around them pulsed with bioluminescent light. Somewhere in the distance, a predator roared, but in the clearing between the shuttles, no one moved. Then Velcrath slowly lowered his weapon. Stand down, he said to his soldiers. Marcus smiled and took another sip of his coffee. Excellent decision, Commander. Now, if you do not mind, I still have some paperwork to complete. The Northern Geological Survey is not going to document itself. They sent him to Class 9 Deathworld to humble him. He filed a safety audit that got the planet reclassified. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordance had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled. Representatives from all 12 star systems sat in their designated tiers, their attention fixed on the central speaking platform where a single human stood holding a datapad. Behind him, holographic displays showed document after document, financial records, survey data, atmospheric readings, and geological maps that told a story 200 years in the making. High Coordinator Velthrix's seat was empty. She had been removed from her position 3 days earlier, pending formal tribunal for fraud, corruption, and attempted murder. The evidence Marcus Webb had gathered was comprehensive, irrefutable, and properly documented according to every relevant regulation. She had no defense. The presiding official, an ancient Morvathi named Kethril who had served on the council for nearly 1,000 years, leaned forward to address the human who had caused so much upheaval. Officer Webb, he said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia, your audit has revealed corruption at the highest levels of our government. Veth Corrigan extraction has been dissolved, their assets seized. Former High Coordinator Velthrix awaits judgment, and the classification system that has governed our approach to frontier worlds for centuries has been called into question. Marcus nodded. I am aware of these developments, Coordinator Kethril. Many on this council believe you have done a great service to the Concordance. Others believe you have caused chaos that will take generations to repair. I am curious to know what you believe. The chamber waited. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. I believe that I did my job. The Concordance created regulations for a reason. Those regulations exist to protect people from corruption, from negligence, from the failures that occur when powerful individuals prioritize their own interests over the common good. When I found evidence that those regulations had been violated, I reported it. That is all. That is all, Kethriel repeated. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Complicated systems often fail because people believe they are too complicated to work. They create exceptions, they allow shortcuts, they decide that some rules do not apply to certain situations, and eventually the system breaks down. He held up his datapad. I do not believe in exceptions. I do not believe in shortcuts. I believe that regulations exist to be followed, and that when they are followed properly, they produce the results they were designed to produce. A murmur passed through the chamber. Another coordinator, a Sithrani named Veltorak who had taken over many of Velthrix's former responsibilities, spoke up. You were sent to Keithrak Roman 7 to die, Officer Webb. Everyone in this chamber knows this. You knew it yourself. Why did you not simply resign, file a protest, expose the conspiracy through political channels? Marcus turned to face the new speaker. With respect, Coordinator, I am not a politician. I am an auditor. Politics involves negotiation, compromise, and the acceptance of imperfect outcomes. That is not my role. My role is to identify violations and document them according to proper procedure. Politics can determine what is done with that information, but the information itself must be accurate and complete. He paused. Also, I was not finished with the geological survey. There are significant rare earth deposits in the northern hemisphere that Veth Corrigan's mining operations missed entirely. Regulation 892.1 requires full mineral assessment before any planetary reclassification is finalized. Several coordinators exchanged glances. You continued your survey even while conspirators plotted your death because of incomplete mineral documentation, Veltorak asked. Of course, the regulations are clear. A partial assessment would have been insufficient basis for reclassification, regardless of the other evidence I had gathered. If we are going to do this properly, we must do it completely. Kethriel let out a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. It was difficult to tell with Morvathi. Officer Webb, you are perhaps the most unusual being I have encountered in 1,000 years of service. I do not know whether to commend you or have you examined for mental instability. I would prefer commendation, Marcus said, but I will accept either outcome as long as it is properly documented. This time, the laughter in the chamber was unmistakable. Kethriel raised his hand for silence. Very well. It is the judgment of this council that Keithrak Roman 7 is hereby reclassified from Class 9 Deathworld to Class 4 Moderate Hazard World, suitable for supervised colonization. Furthermore, a full investigation will be launched into all Class 9 designations currently on record to ensure that no other fraudulent classifications remain in our system. He turned his ancient eyes to Marcus. And as for you, Officer Webb, you will lead that investigation. The Office of Planetary Assessment is being restructured, and we require someone incorruptible to oversee the process. Do you accept? Marcus considered the offer. I will need a proper team, adequate resources, and complete access to all historical survey records. Granted. Then I accept. 1 year later, the first colonial settlement was established on Keithrak Roman 7. The planet that had once been considered a death world now supported 3,000 settlers, with more arriving every month. The Crimson Jungles had been mapped, the predators understood, the geological hazards monitored by proper warning systems. It was still a dangerous world, but danger could be managed when you understood it. The settlement was named Webb's Landing, despite Marcus's objections. He had argued for Survey Site Alpha on the grounds that it was more professionally appropriate, but the colonists had overruled him by popular vote. He accepted the decision grudgingly. Kurevel served as the settlement's first safety compliance officer. She carried a datapad everywhere she went, just as Marcus had taught her. She took notes constantly, and when she found violations, which she did regularly, she documented them according to proper procedure and filed her reports through official channels. Across the 12 star systems of the Galactic Concordance, the investigation Marcus led had already resulted in 15 planetary reclassifications, 27 fraud prosecutions, and a complete overhaul of the frontier assessment process. Worlds that had been considered uninhabitable for centuries were opening up to colonization, and the corporations that had profited from their quarantine were finally being held accountable. The work was slow, methodical, and often boring. Marcus would not have had it any other way. On the anniversary of his original landing on Keithrakroman 7, he stood on a hill overlooking Webb's Landing and watched the sunset turn the crimson jungle to gold. Caravel stood beside him, her datapad temporarily forgotten in her hands. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had gone differently?" she asked. "If the security team had followed their orders, if the council had rejected your evidence, if you had simply died here like everyone expected?" Marcus considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I do not find speculation about alternative outcomes to be productive. The regulations exist. I followed them. The system worked as it was designed to work. There is nothing more to consider." Caravel smiled. "You really are the strangest human I have ever met. I prefer methodical, but I will accept strange if that is your professional assessment." She laughed, and below them, the lights of Webb's Landing began to flicker on, 3,000 lives flourishing on a world that had once been written off as unsurvivable. And somewhere in the vast bureaucratic archives of the Galactic Concordance, a new phrase had entered the official lexicon, appearing in training manuals and cautionary documents and whispered warnings between administrators who had learned an important lesson about underestimating humans. "Do not send a human to humble him. He will audit you instead." Marcus Webb, for his part, had no idea he had become legendary. He was too busy reviewing the survey data for the next planet on his list. There was always more work to be done.